Hey, I'm early as always for our talk today. I wanted to bring up a topic that is often very sensitive and challenging to talk about. So, since I've been working on my throat chakra and really coming forth with my truth, I really wanted to take this opportunity today to talk to you a little bit about this notion of racism. It's all over our news right now. Everybody is talking about racism, whether somebody is white supremacist or whether somebody is saying I'm not racist. The word is being thrown all over, and I just think, first of all, we're not a political group here. I really don't address political issues, or at least I try to avoid them on this group. But we are a group that talks about mindfulness and mindfulness techniques and using them and applying them in our lives. So it's only fitting and fair to bring up the notion of racism from a mindfulness perspective. So as we try to become more mindful, and by the way, I have a lot of notes here because I want to make sure that I cover everything that's in my heart. I typically don't speak from notes, but today this is really, really important talk, so I will be glancing away on occasion to make sure I don't forget anything. But the whole notion of mindfulness has to do with awareness. It has to do with paying attention to our automatic thoughts and reactions about particular topics that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. So we can't ignore the fact that this topic of racism is showing up right now. And to be completely honest, it needs to. So what is going on right now in the world with Donald Trump and racism and all the white supremacists coming forward and people making these bold statements, these bold hateful statements, is really important for the growth of this nation. It's important for us to see what's going on behind the shadows. And what's going on with Donald Trump is he's bringing that out into the open. So all of this hatefulness and the things that have been hidden under Ku Klux Klan members' masks in the past, they're all of a sudden emboldened, and they're bringing these ideas and these perspectives right out in the world for us to see. So I know every one of us who, if we were asked the question, are you racist? Probably pretty much every one of us would say, absolutely not. I am not racist. And I think what's going on right now is we are being called to task to really look in the mirror and really examine ourselves, to not just make that comment flippantly without thought or conscious awareness, but to really search ourselves and find out if there is any bit of racism inside of us. And I would hesitate to say and be willing to say that for most of us there is. And it's not something that we do by choice. It's something that we've been taught. So when these things happened in Charlottesville, Obama tweeted this beautiful tweet from Nelson Mandela, and I want to get the quote right. But the quote is, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, then they can be taught how to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite." So what a message of hope is that we weren't born hating, we weren't born discriminating, and we weren't born racist. Unfortunately, we have been taught these things throughout the years and throughout the generations, through the behavior of others and those that came before us. So we've been taught our normal, and the normal comes from the people that we are surrounded by in our lives. And so we have to take some responsibility for that. And being mindful means becoming aware and searching ourselves to really see if there is something in us that we may not be noticing and that we might just be kind of hiding behind in our lives and our day-to-day activity. So there was an article that I posted, and I don't know if you saw it, but I'm going to reference it a little bit, and I will post the link to it again after this Facebook Live. But the author talked about a hierarchy of racism. And at the top of that hierarchy, he talked about active racism. And that's the smallest amount of the population, are the people who were in Charlottesville, who were out there hating people and truly just being violent and hateful to people because they were different, because they don't believe that they are as good or as have the same rights or rights to personal happiness. And that's the very small top of that triangle. But what we need to really think about, especially if we have white skin, is what's going on lower down that triangle. So the next level down in this triangle, or this hierarchy that he talks about in this article, is quiet racism. And that's the group of people who actually do feel that they are superior, that one race is superior to another, or even one religion is superior to another, or one thought process is superior to another. And these are the people who believe it and feel it, but they don't necessarily act outwardly. They wouldn't really admit it. And I think that's another pretty good segment of the population that's in that category, those quiet racists. But as you work your way down that hierarchy to the soft racists, I have to be honest, I would have to, when I was growing up, I was in that category. And the soft racists, let me get the definition here, they have racial thoughts, but they don't realize that they're racist. So growing up, I didn't have a lot of exposure to African American population. And there was just this subtle undertone that, this is us and that's them. And it wasn't anything you could put your hands around. It wasn't like I could just say, yes, I was taught to be racist. But the ways that it was handled in my life, things like you don't date him because he's black, those were the kind of subtle messages that were brought to the forefront in my life that I didn't even really pay attention to. I really didn't think about it. But in fact, I was racist. I was separating myself and creating an us and them relationship. And most of us had that to some degree in our upbringing, especially if we have white skin. Or if we're heterosexual and we don't understand what a homosexual is dealing with in their lives. We have a hard time understanding people who are different from us. And so some of that racism is rooted in us automatically just from the way we were raised. And so I had to work my way through that as I got older. And to be honest, the bottom of that pyramid, the very largest amount of racism that's out there, is called passive racism. And that is where we don't feel that we're racist. We really believe in equality. But when we see racism happen, we don't speak up. And I have to be really honest with you. I have a challenge with that. That I'm in a job where I'm in sales. And I'm in front of providers, doctors, staff, people that are my customers on a day-to-day basis. And I live in Greenville, South Carolina. And I have to admit, there have been times when racial comments have been made in my presence and I didn't speak out. I felt like kind of torn, like the customer is always right, worrying about how would that impact my business if I speak up on what I truly feel about this. And I think there are so many of us in the world that are hiding behind that really aren't willing to speak up and call out this type of behavior when we see it. And I feel really passionate about that because I feel ashamed of myself for the fact that I haven't been able to do that very well in the past. And I've made a commitment, certainly after seeing the events that have happened in Charlottesville and the pure hatred that's showing up out there, I've really made a commitment to just be more verbal about it, to be more of a spokesperson about the fact that this is not okay, that it's not all right to call people names or to separate them or to ignore these preconceived ideas that we have about them and just accept them as truth. I've caught myself driving through my neighborhood, and we moved here only about a year ago, and noticing that there are a lot of African Americans in my neighborhood. And that brings up automatic thoughts. And they're not thoughts that I'm proud of. They're not thoughts that I would choose to have, but they're my upbringing. And the only way that we can address that is to become aware of that and to pay attention to those automatic thoughts. One of the things that we're doing in my meditation boot camp that I run is we're creating genograms. And a genogram is basically a really good look at a family tree and looking at relationships and trends and things that became our normal. Things that when you look at them from a distance, you find out that you kind of just repeated things that the generations ahead of you did or thought. So if the generation before you was racist, you tend to automatically be normally racist until you notice it, until you become aware of it. So this whole idea of mindfulness practice has to do with bringing to your awareness those automatic reactions that have been ingrained in us. Sometimes past lives. I mean, if you believe in the past life thing, which I do, that things that occurred in past lives stay there, and when you're born, you still kind of have those tendencies. And then when you get in this life, and our parents who were imperfect beings and could only live from whatever was their real or their normal, pass those along to us. So I just encourage you right now to really search yourself and be willing to address and dig deeply. Look in the mirror and dig deeply to try to catch yourself when you find yourself with those types of thoughts. One quote from Gurdjieff, who is a famous philosopher, is until you realize you're in prison, no escape is possible. So until you get to the point where you're willing to admit that racism is a tendency that we have, and it is something, especially with those of us with white skin, until you realize the privilege that you have of not having to think about it and not having to address it because it isn't a problem for you personally, until you realize that and dig in and start making some changes and speaking out about it when you see it happening, you can't make a change. So until you realize that you're that way, that you have that automatic tendency, there's no way to get out of prison. So Gurdjieff was right. Until you realize that you're in prison, no escape is possible. So I'm here today to just speak out and say, I never would want to say that I'm racist. I mean, nobody wants to say that. But the truth is we have racist tendencies. And until we dig in and notice them and address them and call them out when we see them, we can't begin to make a change. And that change happens one person at a time. So racism does exist. It still is alive and well in this country, and it's showing up so that we can see it very, very boldly and very plainly through the leadership in our country. But if you want to make a difference, you really have to speak up. And where the difference is going to happen is going to be when the white faces speak up. Because those are the people, we're the people that can have an impact on these other white faces who are so filled with hatred and fear and dislike and violence towards somebody who is just simply different from them. It's very hard for some people to understand that other people can be different and they can still be equal, they can still be loved, and that we can have a common bond with people who are different from us. It's kind of like I talked about the other day with this notion of inclusion. It's really, really important that we find the commonality in humanity, that we find where we are in common and grow from there instead of focusing so much on the things that we can't begin to understand. So I'm just talking today from my heart to really help you understand how valuable it is and how important it is that this is showing up now in this world, and that we have an opportunity to step into our power and to step into love and to choose that love and to teach that love to our children and to teach the love of equality and how important that is, that we all come from one source and we all have one common goal, and that's to love, to have peace, to have happiness and health, and to make this world a better place for everybody. So speak up on it when you see it happening. Be bold and be courageous. And I'm willing to do that too. I'm willing to step out and call it out when I see it happening, even if it's with myself. So I would encourage you to do that. I'm sending out all love and hope that we can, one person at a time, make this world better and seize this opportunity to come out from the closets and come out from the dark places and really speak our truth and recognize where we're not where we ought to be and peel back those layers to that real inner guru that is truth and is love. Peel back those layers and be willing to speak out against these things that are so wrong and that are so hateful that are going on in this world. So hopefully that's inspiring and that's helpful to you. I love you all. Namaste, and have a wonderful day.